Nobody in that room was prepared for the moment your name came out of their mouth. Conversations stopped. Smiles disappeared. Even the people who had spent months convincing your soulmate to move on suddenly looked uncomfortable, because this was no ordinary confession. Your soulmate had carried these feelings in silence for far too long, and now, standing in front of everyone, they were finally about to reveal what they had been hiding about you. Listen carefully. Because what happened next was not planned, rehearsed, or expected. Your soulmate had walked into that gathering determined to remain quiet. They had promised themselves they would not bring up the past, would not mention your name, and would not allow their emotions to control the evening. But then someone at the table casually asked a question that struck directly at the wound they had been trying to hide. If you could go back and choose one person differently, who would it be? For several seconds, your soulmate said absolutely nothing. Their eyes dropped toward the floor. Their hands tightened together. Someone tried to laugh off the question, but your soulmate suddenly looked up and said, "I already know the answer." The room became painfully quiet. Family members turned toward them. Friends stopped whispering. And the person sitting closest to your soulmate immediately realized that whatever was about to happen could change everything. Then your soulmate said your name. Not quietly. Not as a joke. Not as a passing memory. They said it clearly enough for every person in that room to hear. And before anyone could interrupt, they added, "I loved them when everyone told me not to. I loved them when I pretended I had moved on. And the truth is, I never stopped." The reaction was immediate. One family member looked away. Another appeared completely stunned. Someone who had repeatedly encouraged your soulmate to forget you suddenly became nervous. Because your soulmate was no longer protecting anyone's feelings. They were finally speaking about the nights nobody saw, the moments they almost contacted you, the messages they typed and deleted, and the regret that had followed them every time they tried to convince themselves that losing you had been the right decision. Your soulmate admitted something even more emotional. They said there had been countless moments when they wanted to come back, but every time they gathered the courage, someone reminded them of the old story about you, the story that made them believe you had stopped caring, that you had chosen to walk away, that reaching out to you would only lead to another rejection. For a long time, they believed that version of events. But recently, something had changed. Your soulmate had discovered one small detail that did not match what they had originally been told. Then another detail surfaced. And then one conversation made them question the entire story behind your separation. Suddenly, memories they had tried to bury began making sense differently. Things you once said that seemed confusing now sounded like warnings. Moments when you appeared distant no longer looked like rejection. And your soulmate began wondering whether both of you had been pushed apart by circumstances neither of you fully understood. Don't skip this part. Because this was where the public confession became much bigger than anyone expected. Your soulmate looked directly toward one particular person in the room and said, "You told me they didn't want me anymore." Nobody moved. The person they were speaking to tried to respond, but your soulmate continued. Their voice was emotional now, but controlled. You told me they had already chosen another life. You told me contacting them would humiliate me. And I believed you because I trusted you. Suddenly the atmosphere changed completely. What had started as an emotional confession was becoming a confrontation. Your soulmate then revealed that only days earlier, they had come across something they were never supposed to see. It wasn't a dramatic love letter or some random rumor. It was something far more difficult to explain away, something connected directly to the period when the two of you were pulled apart. And according to your soulmate, it proved one devastating thing. You may have been waiting for them at the exact same time they were being told you had already moved on. That realization had shattered them. Your soulmate admitted that when they first understood what the evidence meant, they sat alone for hours replaying everything. Every missed opportunity. Every birthday they almost contacted you. Every holiday they wondered where you were. Every night they convinced themselves that you had forgotten them. They suddenly realized that the greatest heartbreak of their life might not have happened because love disappeared. It may have happened because someone made sure the truth never reached either of you. Then came the confession that left several people in tears. Your soulmate said, "I blamed them for years. But now I'm beginning to understand they may have been hurting just as badly as I was." Those words changed the room. Because for the first time, everyone heard your soulmate speak about you without anger, pride, or hesitation. There was no pretending anymore. No carefully chosen explanation. No attempt to protect the life they had built after you. They admitted they still remembered your voice. They still remembered conversations nobody else knew about. They remembered promises made when neither of you imagined life could pull you apart. And despite everything that had happened, your soulmate said there had always been one part of their heart they never allowed anyone else to enter. That part still belonged to you. But the most shocking moment had not happened yet. Because after making that confession, your soulmate reached into their pocket and placed something on the table. The second one family member saw it, their face changed completely. Your soulmate looked around the room and said, "This is what I found. And tonight, I want somebody here to finally explain why it was hidden from me." Nobody answered. Your soulmate waited. Then the person who had been unusually quiet since your name was mentioned finally stood up. They looked at your soulmate, then at the object on the table, and whispered something that made your soulmate freeze. Because according to them, what your soulmate had discovered was only half of the truth. There was another piece. And that second piece involved you directly. For several seconds, your soulmate could not even speak. The person standing across the room had just admitted there was another piece of evidence, something your soulmate had never seen, something connected directly to you, and something that could completely change the story they had believed for years. Everyone watched as that person slowly reached into a bag and pulled out an old envelope. It looked worn, almost forgotten, but your soulmate recognized the handwriting on the front immediately. It was their own name written in a style they had seen hundreds of times before. Your handwriting. Their face changed instantly. Your soulmate stared at the envelope as though the entire room had disappeared. They asked where it had come from, but the person holding it hesitated. That hesitation said more than any answer could. Your soulmate stepped forward and demanded the truth. Finally, the person confessed that the envelope had arrived during the worst period of your separation. It had been delivered when your soulmate was emotionally exhausted, confused, and surrounded by people telling them that you had already moved on. But your soulmate had never received it. The room went completely silent again. Your soulmate asked the question everyone was suddenly afraid to hear: why was this kept from me? The answer came slowly. Someone had believed that giving your soulmate the letter would pull them back toward you. They believed the relationship needed to end permanently. They convinced themselves they were protecting your soulmate from more pain, so the letter was hidden. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Eventually, everyone assumed the past would stay buried forever. But it hadn't. Your soulmate took the envelope with shaking hands. They wanted to open it immediately, yet for several seconds they simply stared at it. Their expression carried years of regret. Somewhere inside that envelope were words you had written when everything was falling apart. Words that might finally reveal whether the story they had been told about you had ever been true. Then they opened it. The first few lines were enough to break them. Your soulmate covered their mouth and turned away from everyone. Tears filled their eyes because your message did not sound like someone who had stopped loving them. It sounded like someone who had been desperately trying to save what remained. You had written that you did not understand why they had suddenly become distant. You had written that you were hearing things from other people but refused to believe them without speaking directly to your soulmate. And most painfully, you had written that if there was still even a small chance to repair the relationship, you were willing to meet them and tell them everything face to face. Your soulmate never knew. While you were waiting for an answer, they were being told you had already chosen to leave. While they were trying to force themselves to forget you, you had been trying to reach them. And while both of you were suffering, someone else had decided what each of you should believe. Your soulmate continued reading, but one sentence made them stop completely. You had mentioned a specific meeting place. A place that meant something deeply personal to both of you. You wrote that you would be there on a certain evening, and if your soulmate still cared, they should come. Your soulmate looked at the date. Their entire expression collapsed. They remembered that night. They remembered feeling strangely restless for hours. They remembered almost calling you. They remembered sitting alone wondering whether you were thinking about them too. But someone had convinced them that reaching out would only make them look desperate because, according to what they had been told, you had already started a new chapter without them. Now they realized that at the exact moment they were forcing themselves not to contact you, you may have been waiting somewhere for them to appear. That realization hit harder than anything else. Your soulmate whispered, "They waited for me." Nobody answered. Then they said it again, louder this time. "They waited for me, and nobody told me." The person who had hidden the letter began apologizing, explaining that they had believed they were doing the right thing. But your soulmate could no longer accept that explanation. There are decisions people can make for themselves, and there are decisions nobody has the right to make for another person. Hiding your message had stolen a choice from both of you. Your soulmate looked around the room and asked how many people had known. That question changed everything. One person admitted they had heard about the letter. Another said they had suspected something but never asked questions. Someone else revealed that there had been arguments behind closed doors about whether the truth should be shared. Suddenly, your soulmate realized this had not been one person making one terrible decision. Several people had known pieces of the story, and silence had allowed the lie to survive. Don't skip this moment, because this was where your soulmate stopped grieving only for what happened and started making a decision about what happens next. They folded the letter carefully and placed it against their chest. Then they said, "I spent years believing they abandoned me. I built my entire future around that belief. But if this letter is real, then I owe them something I should have given them years ago, the chance to tell me their side." Someone immediately warned your soulmate not to act emotionally. Another reminded them that too much time had passed. Someone even said that reopening the past could destroy the stability they had worked so hard to create. Your soulmate looked directly at them and replied, "Living inside a lie is not stability." No one had an answer. Then your soulmate made the public confession even more powerful. They admitted that the reason they could never fully give their heart elsewhere was not because they were incapable of moving forward. It was because somewhere deep inside, the ending with you had never felt complete. There had always been unanswered questions, unfinished emotions, and a strange feeling that the final chapter had been written without either of you truly choosing it. Now they understood why. Your soulmate walked toward the table, picked up their phone, and unlocked it. Several people immediately became nervous. One relative asked what they were doing. Your soulmate answered with only 4 words. "I'm finding them tonight." The room erupted. Some people begged them to wait until morning. Others warned them that you might not want to hear from them anymore. Someone said you may have built an entirely different life and that appearing suddenly could cause more pain than healing. Your soulmate listened to every warning. Then they looked back at your letter. And something inside them became completely certain. They said, "Maybe they've moved on. Maybe they'll never forgive me. Maybe they won't even answer. But for once, that decision is going to belong to them, not to everybody else." They began searching for your contact information. But before they could finish, the same person who had revealed the hidden letter suddenly said, "There's something else you need to know before you contact them." Your soulmate slowly lowered the phone. Everyone turned. The person swallowed hard and continued, "That letter wasn't the last time they tried to reach you." Your soulmate froze. Apparently, months after the letter had been hidden, another message had arrived. This one had not been written on paper. It had been recorded. And unlike the letter, the recording contained the name of the person you believed had convinced your soulmate to leave you. But when your soulmate asked to hear it, the person standing in front of them hesitated again. Because the recording did not only reveal what happened between you, it revealed who had been controlling the story from both sides. And that person was still in the room. The room fell into a silence so heavy that even your soulmate could hear their own breathing. The person holding the recording looked terrified, because they knew that pressing play would end years of deception in a matter of seconds. Your soulmate stepped forward and said, "Play it." The recording began with your voice. You sounded hurt, confused, and exhausted, but there was no hatred in your words. You were trying to explain that someone had been feeding both of you different stories, creating misunderstandings, and making each of you believe the other had already chosen to walk away. Then you said the name. Everyone in the room turned toward the same person. It was someone your soulmate had trusted completely. Someone who had comforted them after the separation. Someone who had repeatedly said, "You deserve better. Forget them. Move on." But now the truth was undeniable. That person had been speaking to both sides, changing details, hiding messages, and quietly making sure neither of you ever had the conversation that could have saved everything. Your soulmate's eyes filled with tears, but this time the tears were not only from heartbreak. They were from realization. For years, your soulmate had carried anger toward you that never truly belonged to you. And you had carried pain that had been created by someone else's interference. The person responsible finally broke down and admitted they had been afraid of losing control over your soulmate's future. They thought separating you was the right decision, and once the first lie was told, every new lie became necessary to protect the one before it. Your soulmate listened without interrupting. Then they said quietly, "You didn't protect me. You took away my choice." Nobody could argue with that. Your soulmate picked up the hidden letter, saved the recording, and walked toward the door. Someone asked where they were going. They answered, "To finally speak to the person I should have spoken to years ago." That night, your soulmate did not know whether you would answer. They did not know whether forgiveness was possible. They did not know whether time had changed too much. But they knew one thing with absolute certainty. They were done allowing other people to write the ending of a love story that belonged to the two of you. And when your name appeared on their phone screen moments later, their hands began shaking. Because after all those years of silence, one message had finally gone through. Your reply contained only a few words. But those words were enough to make your soulmate sit down, cover their face, and cry. You had written, "I always wondered when you would finally learn the truth."